Welcome back to the Earn Your Edge podcast. I'm Corey Lundberg from ALTUS Performance, and it's been a while since we've been able to say that. It's been a minute since our last episode, and before we jump in, we just want to address that lengthy pause since the last time that you've heard from us. As ALTUS has grown in the last few years, so have the demands on our time. We have opened up new locations, we've taken on new players, we've spent even more time out on the road coaching, and somewhere along the way, the podcast just had to take a backseat. And it's not because it's something we lost interest in doing. There just wasn't enough hours in the day to do it really well. And the truth is, we have really missed this, and we've heard from many of you who have been kind enough to tell us that you've missed it as well, whether it's players or parents at our facilities in Dallas or Orlando or France, or folks that have just stopped us at junior tournaments or PGA Tour stops out on the road. We've consistently been asked, hey, when is the podcast coming back? And selfishly, we have really missed these conversations. We've missed the chances to sit down with the highest performers in golf, dig deeply into their habits, and unpack what really drives their excellence. It makes us better coaches, and hopefully it gives you, the listener, some insights that you can really use on your journey. So we're back. We're excited to be back. We're going to use a slightly different format this time around. You're still going to hear the same types of conversations that you heard in the past with high performers. But now at the end of each episode, Cam and I are going to have a little bit of a debrief. We're going to pull out what we think are the most useful takeaways and share how they might be able to be applied, whether you're a player, you're a parent, or you're another coach. It's the part of the conversation that Cam and I would always have off mic, and debriefing the great conversations that we've had. And we figured it was a good idea to include those so that hopefully you, the listener, can benefit. And we couldn't think of a better guest, a better way to relaunch than with Ludvig Åberg. He's been a player that we've both admired. In less than a year, he went from this college golf stud to winning on the PGA Tour and then playing on a Ryder Cup team. He's had this rise that's been unbelievable. But what's been more impressive to us is how steady and composed that he's been throughout it all. And as a coach, it makes you curious of what makes him tick. And getting to hear his full backstory from growing up in a small town in Sweden that you wouldn't quite expect a lot of high-performing golfers or tour players would come from, and then attending this sport-specific boarding school. It gave us a little bit more of a complete picture of how all that success has come together. And this conversation was a really fun way to knock off the rust and get back into the interview flow. We hope you enjoy it. Before we dive in, we will have a quick word from a new sponsor. And this episode is brought to you by Coach Now, which is now part of the Golf Genius family. And Coach Now is if you're an ALTUS client, you're very familiar with it. It is an all-in-one platform that we use to deliver coaching more effectively. Instead of just giving players feedback in person and then hoping that they remember everything that we cover, Coach Now lets us stay connected in between sessions with video, voice notes, practice updates, all in one place. It helps us coach better, our players develop faster, and more importantly, it creates stronger relationships between coach and player. And we have used it for over a decade, and there's a reason why over 1 million coaches, athletes, and supporters in 60 different countries trust it. Coach Now has more than 20,000 five-star reviews and counting. And if you want to see why we have trusted it at ALTUS for so long, you can try Coach Now Pro free for 7 days at coachnow.io/edge. See why it's the highest rated coaching platform in the world. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. Here is our conversation with Ludvig Åberg.
Let's kick it off with, I was similar to you in terms of aspirations to play pro golf when I got to Texas Tech, and I relied on talent. But
what year did you start?
Oh, really? You want to go there?
Just out of curiosity.
Just immediately. 94 through 97. And it was the pre-internet days. So all the girls I met, I could tell stories about kangaroos jumping down the street in Australia, and they ate that up. And I got a little distracted on the path, but clearly you didn't. But when you showed up to Lubbock, Texas from the southern area in Sweden, what were your first thoughts?
Yeah, I think, to be honest, probably pretty similar to you. I mean, I loved it. I thought it was very nice. Obviously, it is a little bit different from Sweden, where I grew up, and Texas, and especially West Texas, is a little bit different. I had a lot of stereotypes, and they were probably all true. But I really enjoyed my time. I mean, we had some great coaches at the time. We had some great teammates at the time, and a lot of Scandinavians had been there in the past. So it was a pretty easy transition for me to kind of speak to them, see how they experienced their time there. And at the time when I was recruited, we had Mikkel, Norwegian assistant coach, who made my transition very easy. But I loved it. I mean, I loved my time in Lubbock, and spent probably another eight to 10 months there after I got done with school, living there, and still went back. I went back this past year for a football game in the fall, so I still got a lot of friends and people I care about there.
Has our quarterback Patrick Mahomes been reaching out to you for golf tips?
He has not. He sent me a text one time, and I sent a little nervous reply back, but that's pretty much it.
Fair
Hey,
point.
rewind a little before we're getting text from Patrick Mahomes. And I think a lot of people see your rapid ascent in golf and they assume it happened overnight, but we know that's not true. We know that there were some really key steps along the way, and that's really what we want to dig into. Take us to the earliest stages, like small town Sweden footballer that's dabbling in golf a little bit. What do you remember about those earliest days learning golf?
Yeah, definitely. I think golf's always been around. Me and my family, my dad plays. He never played professionally, but he played at a decent level. I think he had played off two or three at some point. He definitely brought me out when I was very young. I've seen pictures of me with plastic clubs when I was young on the range. Obviously, I don't remember that time, but it was always the summertime because the winter sucks in Sweden. So we didn't really go to the golf course between September till April. It was a summer thing that me and my dad had. I've always liked football, soccer. I've always played it ever since I can remember. And because we could play it all year round, that's what I did. Once I got to age 12 or 13 was when I really picked up on golf again. I started playing more. I started playing tournaments more. Really enjoyed it. I think what I enjoyed was everything was in my own hands. I didn't have to trust my teammates. I didn't have to rely on anyone else. And then it just kind of propelled from there.
Did you have access at the club to a coach locally to you? And did you get coaching from an early age, at least from the standpoint of when you picked the game back up at 12 or 13?
Yeah, I did. We had a local head pro at my home club. I guess you would consider him my swing coach up until high school. I think maybe I practiced 1 hour a week until I was 13. I always played. When I was younger, I would never hit balls on the range. I would never go chip or putt. I would always just warm up, go play. Warm up, go play. So I guess I learned how to play golf and not know swing golf. And then that all changed when I moved to high school and was introduced to my current swing coach.
How much was a peer group a part of that before you got to, I know you went to a specialized sports specialty boarding school where I'm sure that it was quite different. You had a lot of higher achievers around you. Cameron and I always think about during those developmental years, the peer group being so important, like having a group of buddies that either they're good, they're pushing you, or they're just making it a lot more fun. Did you have that, or was it more of just like a family activity at that point?
No, I did. I had some buddies that played, and I was always the youngest by 2 or 3 years. So the guys that I played with, they would hit it further, fly it way past me, and I would always have to like chip and putt it. I always had to make a score somehow. I always remember like being the shortest guy, and they always call me the little guy and all these things. And so I think, and then obviously when I got to high school, it became a little bit different. But those are my early memories, being the little skinny guy that everyone was hitting it further than.
What was that skill progression or scoring change like from when you got back into it at 12, 13 to where you then had this opportunity to go to an amazing school that was kind of purpose for golf?
Yeah, I mean, when I was younger, I didn't score very well. Junior tournaments in Sweden, I guess it would be the correlation to AJGA events. And you kind of start somewhere and then you have to work your way up. It took me a while to get to the highest level. I didn't get there until I was a little bit older. I was never the guy that everyone was trying to beat. I was never the amazing 14-year-old that everyone was trying to beat. I enjoyed playing golf. I enjoyed the challenge and trying to get better, but it was never like, oh my God, this guy is amazing.
I think that'll be encouraging for a lot of our listeners to hear that it wasn't like you were just a world beater from the jump. I read an article where your coach Hans Larson said that you didn't necessarily stand out when you got to the school. I guess there's some kind of, it's maybe run by the Swedish Federation, but he said that you didn't necessarily stand out right away. Obviously that changed pretty quickly. What was the pivotal moment, or what do you remember about changing when you got to that school to where obviously you made leaps and bounds, you improved a bunch?
Yeah, I think so. I think just the fact that he was like, "Hey, you need to practice," was a little bit like,
Stop playing so much,
okay.
get to the range.
Yeah, exactly. God, you got to hit balls. And then obviously, he was sitting on a ton of knowledge that I had no access to before that. And he taught me how to play. He taught me how to swing, and all the Swedes in general. They have very sound mechanics, and the technical parts are usually pretty sound. And I guess that's how we started. Then, it probably took me a while before I got better, but eventually I did. The last probably year or so, 2 years probably, it got significantly better.
You mentioned that as a youngster playing tournaments, you may not have necessarily been a standout, but
Mm.
oftentimes there are those pivotal moments, we could call them, that tell us that there is promise that we should maybe pursue this with greater intensity or a focus towards trying to achieve something greater than we could ever imagine. Were there any pivotal moments, rounds of golf or tournament finishes as you went into that high school stage that you could speak to?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do remember every year in the late summer, early fall, there's this junior tournament you qualify for if you're a top guy, and I think there's 30-man field or something like that. And I remember I played that one, and I must have finished like dead last. It wasn't very good at all. This was the first week of the new high school, and I'm freaking out. But I still got the support, put my head down, and then kept playing, kept practicing. And I remember that winter, we spent a lot of time hitting balls into a net, like a lot of time. And in the first tournament, I came back in the spring, 6 months later, maybe, I ended up winning that one, which was obviously very satisfying and very
Sure.
rewarding. I think it just shows that even though I was about to turn 16 at this time, so it wasn't like, oh my God, he's going to be amazing because he's playing good golf when he was 14. I was almost 16. You see guys on the PGA Tour when they're 16, and I wasn't even sniffing that. It was interesting to look back and see how it changed pretty quickly.
I've got a follow up if that's okay, Corey. So to anchor to Corey's comment, that's encouraging for many of our listeners because there's so few of the kids that we've coached that we would consider early ripe. They're early risers. From a biological standpoint, how early were you to go through your maturation of puberty and then develop into, gosh, you're 6'3" now?
Yeah, I must have been pretty tall early on. I mean, maybe I hit 6 feet and I was 15, maybe something like that. I'm not sure to be honest. But yeah, I was always skinny, always lanky. I didn't hit it very far.
Do you call how far as a 15-year-old, 16-year-old?
Or any speed stat?
Yeah, I do remember actually when I got to high school, I was swinging at maybe 114, 113, something like that.
Kilometers per hour? The miles per hour.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that must be true.
That's pretty darn fast for a
Yeah, that's not bad.
15-year-old. That's real fast.
I was 16 at the time. Most of that growth must have been between 14 and 16.
You mentioned, you had to go.
I want to move on to college stuff, but I know,
Yeah.
Cameron, you're going to have plenty of questions. Like when he says hitting into a net, everything you've said has popped up like 5 or 6 coach questions for me. So we'll try not to speak over here. I think about how many advantages we have in the US and specifically Texas, where we've got a warm climate, we've got really long days, we have world-class facilities. And as a coach, you start to think like, you see someone as talented as you are come out of an environment much different than that. It makes you question which elements of that environment are really critical to development. If you had to look back, it sounds like the answer is in coaching, where you really had access to a lot of knowledge and time, but I don't want to answer that for you. What do you feel like were those most important elements of your development that would answer that question of how can this kid come from some small town in Sweden to where you are now?
Yeah, I think so. I guess the view that most of us in Sweden have growing up is like there's always going to be some guy in Florida that plays all year round. There's always going to be someone in California that plays in sun in December, and we're like, can't see the sun for 2 months. And yeah, that's just different. It is different, but to be honest, I didn't really think of it that much at the time. I thought, that's just how it is. That's just the way it is. And I think now looking back, it definitely helped me to lay the foundations of my game. Because to be honest, in the last 7 years, my swing hasn't changed too much. I mean, yes, bits and pieces here and there, but the foundation was laid when I was in high school. And I'm probably going to be forever grateful for those long months that we had in the winter where we literally would just hit balls into the net for hours and didn't really care about where the ball was going. We would just kind of video it and like, oh, I'm hitting these positions, I'm doing all this.
Mhm.
And we thought it was the coolest thing. We had one trackman at school and everyone was fighting over hitting a couple of shots. And because there was always this big line of guys wanting to hit shots in the trackman because you could see your club path and all these things. It was a good balance between my growing up of playing a lot and then practicing a lot, a healthy balance. I don't think too much of this is good. So somewhere in the middle is where I kind of found my space.
Yeah. Going to the college days, what was it about the US college system that attracted you to make that choice? Or was it strictly just you felt like, while pro golf might be your future, you weren't quite ready for it at that point in time?
Yeah, 100%. It was a little bit of both. I'd heard a lot about college and those things. Growing up in Sweden, college isn't like, oh, I'm going to go to college, especially not in America. One thing is that it's hard to combine studies after school and sports in Sweden. It's almost like you got to pick either or. When I was able to do both, that was perfect. I wasn't going to be good enough to turn pro when I was done with high school. I felt like I needed a couple more years to practice and get better. When I was able to get my education at the same time, that was perfect. When I moved over to school, yes, I wanted to become a professional golfer, but it wasn't like I have to become a professional golfer. As long as I get my education, that's fine. I'll be okay. So yeah, I'd say those things.
The last year at college when it was the first year that we had PGA Tour U, and the first year that somebody was going to get their PGA Tour card through PGA Tour U, you entered that senior year at number one, assuming that that's a hell of a lot of pressure for a young kid to feel. And not only did you maintain that lead, but you extended it. You had top tens in every event that you played in college. And we're going to dig in a little bit to this because Cam did some intel. He reached out to Coach Sands. How did you handle the pressure? Looking back on that, what were the tools and tactics that allowed you to not just the pressure of a round, but an entire year? There's a big consequence to me playing good here.
Vividly remember sitting in our locker room when they dropped the news. They're like, there's going to be a PGA Tour card at the end of the season that's a one guy. I'm like, holy.
That's me right now.
I'm like, whoa. So
Oh.
obviously that created a lot of motivation. As a college kid, there's no bigger carrot to play for. I mean, that's what you want to do. And obviously I've grown up watching the PGA Tour and wanting to be on that stage and playing those tournaments. And all of a sudden here is a pathway. If you play well and you perform, you're able to do that. So yeah, there's always going to be pressure. I definitely felt that too. But to be honest, I felt like I handled it really well because it didn't change anything for me. It didn't change the way that I operated in my training and my practice. Those things are always going to be the same. And then obviously at the end of the fall, starting the spring, I started playing pretty well and I started to winning tournaments, which I hadn't really done that much before. And I think I won 4 times my senior spring. I ended up playing really well, kind of getting it all together. I always saw it as a massive carrot that helped me more than hindered me.
Pulling on that thread of the reconnaissance, the research that we did and what Greg helped us with, he said that you always possess this sense of calm and placed a high priority on the things that other people would be able to see if they were watching you perform, like walking tall and chest out with confidence. Where would you trace that back to in terms of the sources of that learning, and how important was that for you to then bring all of the physical skills to the fore to win the number of times that you won in college?
We had a guy coming in my sophomore year or junior year, maybe. I can't remember. He was a big guy and working with those things, how you walk, how you talk to yourself, how you use your breathing, how you do all these things that, will help you during a round. And I think those things really help me because it is a difference, whether you like it or not, how you're walking. And if you have your head down, if you have your chest up, if you use breathing every now and then. It definitely made a difference for me, and I still use it. I still work with the guy, so it's not easy, but it definitely helped me.
To hear that a player of your level is being really intentional about that and thinking about that stuff is just music to our ears, because we can have conversations with players and younger players that may not recognize the importance of it. They kind of roll their eyes at it. To have it coming from you is really powerful. I want to fast forward to the Masters this year. It stood out to me so much. You're in contention, your first time playing a major. I remember I was watching it with my son. We hit in the water on 11 and I see you walking off the green on 11 on Sunday. And I was just like, Oliver, are you seeing this right here? Like, this guy is acting like nothing happened at all. Please pay attention to this moment. I would love for you to, and then you make birdie on 13 and 14, you bounce back, you finish solo second in your first major, first Masters. Can you take us back a little bit to what does that look like internally? What is the self-talk, or is that something from Joe? And we want to talk about that relationship between you and Joe. Are those conversations you're having? Just take us in that moment to hopefully we can learn from that experience.
Yeah, definitely. It was my first major and everything that comes with that, and I absolutely loved it. I've always loved Augusta. I've always loved the Masters, and I found myself tied for the lead after 9 or 10. We all know that hitting in the water on 11 isn't ideal. I also felt like at that point I wasn't really out of the tournament. Scotty was behind me and he was playing really well, but I still felt like if I can just finish, because it was played pretty tough that day. It was windy. Well, you still had to play a pretty good round to win the tournament from where Scotty was at the time. I just felt like I can just, keep my head down and keep playing. Me and Joe, we use the word keep playing a lot. So good things will happen if you keep playing, but if you stop playing, bad things are going to happen. That's the easiest way I can put it. If I keep playing, my skills are going to show up. I don't know what's going to happen. I might stiff it on a par three. I might two putt birdie. I might chip in. Something's going to happen if I just keep playing. And at that time, I remember, I think Joe told me, or maybe I thought it to myself, but I just thought keep playing, and ended up hitting a nice 4 into 13, and then wasn't good enough at the end to win, but it was still a really cool experience.
Can I go back even a little bit further to the reaction post shot? Most players in that situation would express so much more visible disappointment, whether with their hands or the words coming out of their mouth. But you almost looked across at Joe, and while there was a tone of disappointment in the look, there was also a tone of maybe a visible forgiveness, like you were laughing it off. Is that correct at all?
I think so. I don't really remember the reaction on my face, but the one thing I do remember is that we should have hit a different shot. I remember I hit a 5-iron and I tried to almost ride the wind a little bit. And at that time, with the way I was swinging, my miss was always going to be with the wind. So I should have played a shot that was more holding. And if I missed it, it was going to miss right. So I think we probably said something along those lines of like, hey, we should have hit the other shot. And I love Joe because he keeps things so simple, and I do the same. We try not to overdo anything, and I liked it on the other hand too because it was an aggressive mistake. It wasn't like 12 tee box miss.
Right.
It was actually pretty close to staying up, even though it was in the water and it's a bad miss. It was still aggressive and kind of keep the foot on the pedal.
I think that baked into that response that I'm hoping our listener hears is one that there's a lot of optimism and keep playing. There's a lot of optimism to thinking if I keep playing, good shit is going to happen. And then there's also, we tell players all the time that we have to have affirmations like that during a round. Something as simple as keep playing is a really good affirmation to keep us on that. Is there anything that you do because Coach Sands mentioned how intentional you are about the mental performance? Are there any rituals or tools, tactics, specific things that you'll do before a round that puts you in that best performing self, that performance state that you play your best in?
There's actually not a ton that I'll do. You mean when you see the basketball players sit with their headphones?
Exactly.
I don't really do any of those things. I keep it very light. I won't be the guy that's loud and screaming, but if I'm on the range, I'll keep it loose. I'll talk, I'll make jokes to Joe or whoever's with me. There's not a set routine of like, hey, I'm always going to play this song 10 minutes before I go. I'll do a bunch of breathing between shots on the range or between walking between the green and the range or short game. I remember at a tournament, it must have been the US Open. Yeah, it was in the first round, and I was doing the breathing and I could not breathe. There's something that's not right. So obviously there was a physiological reaction to the situation, and ever since I figured that it's pretty important. I'll definitely keep doing those things.
So, sorry, Cam, I know you'll want to jump in here, but let me ask that differently. So if we're not talking about the full round, how about routine? How about as soon as Joe puts the bag down, are there a couple things that you see as essential before you hit a golf shot from that time he sets the ball down to when you hit a shot?
100%. I think a routine is one of the most important things in golf because you can always rely on your routine, whether you're on hole 12 at Augusta when everything's swirling or you're playing a tournament with your buddies. It doesn't matter. You can still do your routine. I think that's been the key for me my whole career. You'll see it when I do a little takeaway drill before every shot. I started doing that when I was 17 or 18, and I just kept doing it because it's now so ingrained in my routine that I have to do it. But yeah, there are certain things that, obviously the name and the number and the club and all these things needs to match up, and we have like a little checklist of things that I'd like to get done before I hit a shot.
You mentioned the word career, and it's a career in its infancy, but the ascent has been nothing short of a rocket ship. So many accomplishments in such a short period of time. At any point, has anything that you've accomplished taken you by surprise?
Good question. I think I'm not sure surprise is the right word. I'll have such belief in myself and my abilities that I'm not expecting it, but I'm impressed by myself, if you know what I mean. And I wouldn't say surprise, but when I got picked for the Ryder Cup, that was a big moment for me. 3 months prior, I had no slightest idea that I was going to pick for the Ryder Cup. It wasn't even on the back of my mind. I thought if I can just turn pro, make a few good starts, maybe get into the playoffs, then I'll be really happy. Didn't get into the playoffs, went to Europe and played a few events, and I think the Ryder Cup was a big moment for me as well.
You didn't just play a few events. You played a few events. You're humble.
That's part of the Swedish culture. It's much different than most rookie experiences. Most guys come up with their group of guys in the Corn Ferry and then their rookie year. Did you find that to be intimidating, or did you find some mentors in that room? Were there any guys that were open to that you can kind of lean on for some advice early on?
Yeah, it was always going to be intimidating. It's almost like every step in golf, there's always going to be intimidation. It was the same thing when I started college. It was intimidating. Going to high school, that was intimidating because there's year 3 older than you and they're bigger and they hit it further. And same in college, and then obviously same when you turn pro. There's always going to be someone better than you until you are the best player in the world. There's always someone better than you. And I didn't necessarily have a guy on the team that I would lean on more. It was more of me being in that room and hearing what they said and how they talk about things and going about their business in a practice round and playing with Rory and Victor. These guys are the best players in the world. This is how they do it. And it was more of a affirmation of, okay, you're not that far off of that. And then, yeah, it was just really cool.
What were your emotions and what was the psychology like between you and Vic in that match against Scotty and Brooks?
Yeah, it was a freak result. None of us were ever expecting anything like that. We played really well. They didn't have their best day, and that's how it is sometimes in foursomes. It's a weird dynamic. We kept hitting fairways and greens, and I remember we were walking off maybe 8, going to 9 tee box or something like that, and we were pretty much ahead. And sometimes in match play, it's easy to get a little complacent and, okay, let's just ride this out or whatever. But we literally said like, okay, let's just keep the foot down. Let's keep winning holes. And I think we won 9 and 10, eventually 11 too.
We talk a lot about goal setting and having expectations that are anchored to reality with our clients, young and old. Are you in any way similar to that? Do you set goals at the start of a year? Do you have expectations of whether that's the type of practice, the volume of practice, or maybe it's the end result, meaning the performances?
Yeah, I love goals. I think it's very important to have something to work towards. And I like to work it in both short term and long term. So whether, a long term goal of mine is like, hey, I want to do this and that in my career. Is that going to make me go and practice 9 hours tomorrow? Probably, but it's also going to be a little bit tricky. That's why I like to have the short-term goals, because it's a little bit more tangible. I can touch it a little bit more. So I always like to divide those in two. I think it's just because I'm such a process-driven guy that it doesn't really work very well when I say, hey, I want to win 3 times, or if I want to do things result-wise. If I can gain 0.5 putting instead of 0.2 over 3 months, that's going to lead me to better results. And I think that'll help me more in my practice. That'll help get me driven more in my training to be able to do that and to be able to reach those results that I want to.
You may have answered my next question there, was how informed is that goal setting process by stats? How frequently are you looking at the metrics, and how has that evolved over time? Because it may not have been part of your development, but now you've got a shot link, you have guys that are dedicating a lot of time and effort into looking at stats. What's the relationship with those metrics now?
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm a numbers guy. I wouldn't say like, hey, I love looking at spreadsheets. But I don't even sure how to work Excel. I think looking at stats is important because it's also looking at, hey, what am I good at and what can I get better at? If there's something that you're good at, keep doing that. But it's also important to find the things that you need to improve on. I've always used stats. I used it through college. I used it to kind of work on my training and tailor my practice. It's funny how sometimes you put a little bit extra time in some areas, and then obviously the stroke gain goes up
Right.
a little bit over a couple of tournaments. And now I'm fortunate enough to have the shot link and some people helping me with the stats, and I definitely use it because I think it is very important. But I wouldn't say that I'm constantly looking at stats and numbers and on my free time, I guess.
Cam, have you looked at that spider chart?
I definitely have. It's wide in all areas. There's simply
Exactly.
zero deficiencies.
I'd feel bad for the stats guy because those ways to improve are pretty razor thin. So
Yeah.
then that leads to, what does your practice look like right now? You mentioned before, and I think it's really interesting. I think we should elaborate a little bit on that period of time during your development where you were hitting into a net. Obviously, there's a ton of form focus. The priority really is on technique. And then there was a time where you need to be a little bit more skill and performance focused. What's the balance of that these days during your practice, both during off season and during the season?
The Swedish national team really helped me with this, and they formulated they call it the golf pyramid, basically, that there might be similar instances and examples, but I use it quite a bit in my training. Basically, the lower you are in the pyramid, the more reps you have, the less consequences. It's more block training, it's more block practice, and on the range hitting 7 irons in a mirror, that would be very low in the pyramid. And then obviously when you get higher up, that would be one shot, big consequences, lots of pressure, and you get nervous. Working your way up and down that pyramid is the way I like to operate my training. Back in high school, it was very low in that training pyramid. A lot of reps, zero consequences. It was hitting a set number of balls into the range, taking videos and get the feels right and trying to get the drills right, and worked a lot with drills and over exaggerating the feels and the movements. I still do that, but I tend to do it a lot less. I do think this time of the year, it is important to go a little bit deeper and set the foundations a little bit more. Ultimately, when you play a lot, you are gonna, unless you really diligent with your practice, you're gonna go a little bit sideways sometimes, which is how you play golf, really.
I don't want you to disclose any state secrets, but when you said go deeper and started to talk about the technical piece of there's progression up the pyramid and regression down the pyramid, I think Corey and I at the same time perked up. Not that we haven't been fully perked up in this conversation, but when you're talking to a couple of coaches, when you start the conversation about technique, I messaged Joe Scover, your caddy, and he said he's been around the best players in the world for 20, 25 years now. And he said that you are peerless in terms of your knowledge of your own swing DNA. So your swing smarts, your swing IQ as to what makes you tick. I'm just curious as to what do you look at that for things that get off, like what things get off in your technique that produce what types of shots when you're not at your best?
Feel free to go full dork out mode right here. We have an audience that would be very excited.
Hold on, let me put my glasses on.
So basically, whenever I'm not swinging the way I want to, it all starts in my hips. I'm swaying my hips. I'm not really rotating. I'm not really loading into my right side. Ultimately, my spine is going to get a little bit towards the target because I'm swaying my hips. And then all of a sudden from here, the only way I can go is here. So I've created this massive side swing in my spine. Then I get behind it and I'll throw my hands, and that's when both left and right comes into play. So if I take a video face on the range and I see my hip not really rotating and not really loading into my right side, I'll hit a bunch of balls and try to do that.
Is there a specific drill that you do or just a sensation that you work on?
Yeah, I feel more rotation in my hips. I usually feel in my left leg, kind of my left leg go a little bit forward and my right hip go a little back. We've always had this expression of kind of creating a ball. If I were to take a video face on and draw a line from my right foot down in my backswing, I would like to have a little bit of a space between that line and the hip from the start. So I like to do that. I'll grip my club with the left hand, and then I'll put my right hand flat on the side of the grip. From there, I have to be more active with my body and compress it. If I get behind it, I'm not making contact. It's going to go left, right. So it's all about matching up the body, the phase, and the club. I've learned over the past 2, 3 years that those things are so important to me that nothing else really matters. If I can just control those couple of easy things, I'll be able to score a little bit better.
How many shots would you have to hit that are the miss that you're talking about for you to investigate, whether that's with a video camera or a secondary set of eyes, meaning your coach?
Not a ton, to be honest with you. I can feel it pretty easy when I see a certain ball flight. If I'm intending to hit a certain shot and it doesn't add up, I'll always go and say, hey, what did I do? Was it, was it a bad club? Was it a wind? Was it a swing? Was it whatever fault it was? And if it was a swing fault, I can pretty easy say what it was. And if it didn't match up with the way I wanted to feel, 'cause I've always said that I'm okay with missing left and right, but I want to be able to feel that I miss left and right.
Right.
I hate feeling like it's going to
The
go right and it
surprise.
goes left. Yeah, I absolutely hate that. I feel like I can scrape it around pretty well as long as it matches up.
Right. Makes
Are
sense.
there any hard and fast rules on Monday through Wednesday or even during the tournament? I know it changes event to event, the time you're spending between form and skill work. So now instead of saying a season, let's drill down into an actual tournament.
Yeah, definitely. Me and my coach use the expression of brushing our teeth. Basically, you just do it a little bit every day. And if you do that for a long period of time, you're going to be fine. So we'll brush our teeth probably, I don't know, 20 minutes Monday, 20 minutes Tuesday, 20 minutes Friday, something like that, maybe on average. And then I always like to work the ball both ways. We'll go down a little bit further in the pyramid for a little bit, and then we'll go up again, go do some ball flights. I always feel like I play my best when I'm able to hit a little draw when I want to, or I want to hit a little fade, so I'll do that. I guess my swing is pretty neutral to where I can do that pretty easy just by changing a little bit in my setup.
How often are you on the golf course curving it both ways?
I would say 90% of the time, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It is a little bit. And once again, I hate feeling restricted and that I can't do this, I can't hit the fade, or I can't do this. And it is a hard balance because obviously from college to pro, you're playing a lot more golf.
Right.
It's a hard balance. Before it would be like, okay, I'm struggling, I'll just go hit balls on the range for 3 hours and then be ready for the tournament next week. Now all of a sudden you're playing Sunday and you got a day to prepare and then you got to go play pro. So that balance is tricky, but it's definitely something that I would encourage a lot of junior players and college players to do, is to play more and be okay with playing.
One last question on that technical piece is you're into a net sometimes to manage the technique within really tight tolerances and reacting only to one or two shots that don't come out as expected. But how does that then translate to the golf course? Oftentimes the question we end up asking, because it's such a conversation point in our coaching, is do you take a swing thought to the golf course? And if the answer is yes, how detailed or how would you describe what that swing thought is?
Yeah, I do. It's not like massive one, but I always have my go-to is to feel a strong face, because I used to come a little bit from going back to high school. I would roll my hands, the face would be open, and all sorts of bad things will happen from there. So I always like to feel. That's why you'll see me do the
That
takeaway
takeaway?
drill, and it literally came from in college or in high school. Me just feeling like a strong face. I was doing that for 6 months in the wintertime, practicing, and then when I came out, it just happened, and all of a sudden I keep doing it for every shot that I've ever hit. So I always feel like, for me at least, that my face controls my swing. So if my face is not right, then bad things will happen. But if I can keep my face strong, then all of a sudden I can create power, I can rotate, I can shift the pressure, I can do all these things. But if my face is a little weak, then all of a sudden I won't load and then I won't put pressure. For me, the face is super important.
One last piece here, and we're going to let you go soon. I'm sure Cameron and I both started to think about this when you mentioned that now you're having to play a lot. You can't just go and take a 2-week break like you could in college. You're having to figure out a way to make things work on the golf course, even though you may not have your A game. I want to ask what you've learned about being able to do that. And then I'm just assuming that Joe has changed the way that you attack the golf course and make decisions out there. So compared to the college version of yourself, what's changed now with the tactics and decision making to serve that?
Joe definitely brought a different dimension to how you view golf.
He's good.
And
He's really good.
such a simple thing that I'm like, I've played golf for 20 years, and when you're playing in crosswind, and when you hold it, it's going to be this, and when you draw, it's going to be this, and then you play this number, and a draw to 8 is always going to be further than. So there's all these things that he was like, well, yeah. But yeah, I think we always try to play aggressively off the tee and conservatively into the greens. I like to use my driver. I like to hit driver as much as I can because I know over time that I'll gain strokes that way. And he definitely changed that, probably a little bit more conservatively into the greens. And that's why you'll also see my approach stats go up this year. And that purely comes from picking the right shots. If I pick this shot and I pull it, I'm still going to be fine. If I pick that shot and I push it, I'm still going to be in this bunker, which is easier. So those things that he helps me with is amazing. And I can't thank him enough for doing that.
Is there anything that you guys do Monday through Wednesday that you think separates you that's different from even the best players in the world?
We keep it very light, so we'll have a lot of fun, which I think is very important.
It gets heavy after 7 days.
It gets heavy after a long time, and we enjoy each other's company, and I can't really speak for him, but at least I enjoy his company. Yeah, I think we have a pretty set structure in the way that we work, and using the pyramid is almost like the foundation of the prep and the work that we do is important. It helps you kind of like go down the pyramid for a little bit, and then we'll go back up instead of letting ourselves work on the technical part for 2 hours and then nothing's really changed. Working up a little bit, go back up, hit some shots, and then go play. Ultimately, you need to score and play well.
You've given us a wealth of knowledge and shared a lot of time with us. As you mentioned on the front end of the conversation, you're getting ready to leave for a trip and you've got family in town. So before we let you get back to the family, if we could finish with one question for the youth players out there, maybe they're 15 years old, and the parents of those youth players, if you could give advice to Ludvig at 15, what would that advice be?
I think the most important thing that I've learned is to always stay a student. There's so many, there's so many instances where it's easy to go, well, I can do this, I'm better than you. But there's always going to be someone who can hit a low shot better than you, or hit a draw better than you, or hit a high shot better than you, and putt better than you, or chip, or hit a driver, or 3-wood. And there's all these aspects of golf that there's always someone who's really good at something. And I think as long as you stay a student, and as long as you listen to what other people say, you might not be right, and it might be, okay, I hear what you're saying, but I'm not going to use it. At least I've heard your version of it. And I think that's been really important to me. I'll never view myself as someone who's better than anyone else. I'll always listen to what they say, and then I might use it and I might not.
Beautiful. What a great learner's mindset. We can't thank you enough for spending the time you've spent with us tonight. We look forward to seeing you on the road here in the coming weeks, and we'll be cheering from the sidelines.
Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate
Cheers.
it.
Thanks, bud.
All right.
Okay,
Thanks,
see ya.
guys.
Okay, these are all my Ludvig notes.
So we're going to try something new here, Cam. Me and you both are listening to the wisdom of these interviews. And I think as coaches, we want to be able to hit timeout in between the interviews and say, hey, everyone listening, whether you're a coach, you're a player, you're a parent, highlighting the really important pieces. And so as we're ending our break and we're starting back into the podcast, I think that one thing that we really wanted to change was allow us the opportunity to break down whatever those key performance threads are together at the end of the episode, so that there's some really practical applications, so that everybody listening walks away with some actionables, some big pieces, big ideas, big themes that we can go put into action. Does that make sense?
100%. And there were so many in the Ludvig conversation.
Yeah,
There's just a sampling of the notes that I took down, or at least kind of underscored, underlined as Ludvig was talking, and then went back and re-listened and wrote a couple of keynotes. And one of those was, when he was young. It's not one of those cases with Ludvig of he was a world beater at 12, 13, or 14 years old. And so for the youth player out there and the parent of the youth player out there, I think it's super important that we underscore that just because you are not early ripe doesn't mean that you can't ultimately reach the pinnacles of golf, because there are just as many kids who were early ripe, meaning best as a 10, 12, 13, 14-year-old, but ultimately tripped and fell, stumbled at some point, whether that was coming out of high school into college or college and then beyond into the professional ranks. And this up and to the right trajectory just did not continue in that way.
Yeah, I think it's a really powerful counterpoint to the story that we hear a lot of the times that this early specialization model, like it's really pressure packed. You see 10, 11, and 12-year olds almost treating this like their pre-pro phase. I see a parent like berating their kid for like an hour over the performance that he had, and it's like really disheartening. But when you hear a story like Ludvig, he said he was practicing 1 hour a week when he was 12. That feels almost negligent compared to everything that we see in junior golf if you really are immersed in that environment, in that landscape of what it looks like right now. So I think it's a real relief to hear, oh my gosh, we don't have to be elite at 12 years old. This can be a slow build over time. And then I think the takeaway that I really wanted parents to get there was that during that phase, the sampling phase, 10, 11, 12, 13, your job is not to create a bunch of pressure on the performance on how good or bad every single round of golf is. But I think that your job is to protect that passion that your golfer is building for the game. And that is going to be a requirement to sustain the really hard work that's got to happen over a long period of time. So that was the big idea that I wanted people to grab onto from there.
Beautiful. And that second point that I think we both had written down there was um, the weather that Ludwig grew up in, that acted as much as a forcing function as anything else might be, shifting him to this optimized periodization type of training, where in the 5 or 6 months over those wintertime months where they couldn't get outside, then once he was dedicated to golf in high school, he and his peers were essentially just block practicing into a net. And there's a similar story that happened early this year where Rory McIlroy was famously quoted as saying he went into an indoor facility and essentially took away ball flight as a mechanism to, I guess, judge the results, because he recognized that he needed to right the ship. What I mean by right the ship, get some of the technical aspects back in check, clean up some deficiencies that emerge over time in a player's technique. And I think that the more we can, as parents, as coaches, and the more players can lean into having those windows of opportunity, breaks in a competitive schedule, to dedicate time to lift the floor, so to speak. If there's one aspect in your technique that may be holding you back, it's the root cause of a particularly troubling shot. And that troubling shot likely shows up under high pressure pack situations. Then it's going to be a hard thing for you to course correct and develop out of that root flaw while you're competing. And so giving yourself that break from competition to enable that, maybe move to Sweden and put yourself in that cold environment and grind it out.
Yeah, I've used this example a lot. I've told this story that Ludwig told us about. He was coming out of or going into that first winter at boarding school. He wasn't like a world beater, and then you spend 6 months hitting into a net. He comes out of it. He wins his first tournament. I've used this example with clients to try to get some buy-in, because so many times we have this like instant reaction to the feedback that we're seeing in ball flight. If it isn't going the way that we want it to, then we, as me and you say, Cam, they spit the bit. And so I think it's a lesson of ownership, that to stick with something long enough to really, really own it. It kind of reminds me of COVID, Cam, when COVID hit and all of our clients went out and bought a net, and they were all hitting balls into a net in their backyard. And then we start to see them, 5, 6 weeks later, and it's like, oh my gosh, they've had this incredible progress over this time where they've just been grinding on technique. And we talked about a lot the mix between blocked and and skill work, random work. It's definitely heavy blocked work. But as you say, there is a time and a place for that. And so I thought that was a really cool story to come out of this conversation with Ludvig. The next topic that I wrote down that I thought was really cool was the peer group that he had. So he talked about playing with older players who hit it further than him, who are a little bit better than them. And we talk a lot about this normalizing excellence, being around players that put us in that stretch zone where it's not so far off that we're overwhelmed or intimidated by them. But they are better or they are good enough to really make us stretch. And I think that there's some really powerful things that happen when we start to kind of create that identity and those standards around us. I mean, I'm around it every day. I'm around a high performing individual in Cameron McCormick who shifts what the identity should be to be a great coach and what the standards are for what great coaches do. How you do anything is how you do everything. And to be in that environment pushes everyone. And so I think the lesson is parents and players is to find that group that stretches you a little bit. If you look around and you're the best player, well, then you're probably cruising. We talk about getting by or getting better. If you're the best player in your group, you're probably just getting by, and we want someone to push you to get a little bit better. So I thought that was a really powerful story that came from Ludvig's development, those early days, him getting better.
Yeah, I think those are great points, and I'll actually just leave it at that so we can bounce into the next piece. And there are kind of a couple pieces here. First, what Ludvig mentioned, he learned working with sports psychologists at Texas Tech, which is the scaffold around the physical skills is the mental skills. And I mean, maybe it's a wrong term to say scaffold because it can, a solid mental game can just as much elevate a substandard, let's say, physical skill set on a given day, just as much as the inverse of that is true, that you might have a solid golf swing and your skills may be ready to perform. You may have just shot 65 or 70 in a practice round, but yet as soon as that 300-pound pencil gets put in your pocket and that weight of expectation on being able to, or wanting to is a very important word, shoot a score, then those physical skills crumble because they don't have that the scaffold of mental skills. And so those breathing strategies that he mentioned, learning and being very much ever present, a part of his preparatory routines, whether that's before a round or within a round, and reminding himself that those things are essential. They're cornerstones of his best performing self, I think was some critical information coming out of that. And then there's another piece there where in the moment, a self-belief that he described when I asked about the shot that he hit on 11 at Augusta when he hit it in the water there, and where does the mind go into in that moment, and where his mind goes to when faced with those difficult moments, the hard shots where maybe you don't execute to plan. And you face a situation where you feel yourself in contention and you want to get the result, but yet you don't. His attitude is just keep backing yourself, keep double downing on the practice that you've put in, because the skills will eventually show up. And it reminded me of the Finding Nemo, Dory, just keep swimming.
Exactly.
Ludvig, just keep playing. He and Joe just countering backward and forward with, we're just going to keep doing us. And we know that all that hard work will materialize in a better result.
Yeah, it's the power of having an affirmation. And the reason why I love hearing those stories in these interviews is because it's coming from the best player in the world. It's not mom telling you, hey, our mental skills really matter. It's not coach saying, hey, our body language and breathing matters. They sound like soft skills that aren't nearly as fun as learning how to hit a 350-yard drive. But when you hear the best player in the world say how important it is, it carries a lot of weight. And so all those mechanics that you have, they don't matter unless you can get into the right state for them to show up. So the last big idea, the last theme that I think as coaches, me and you, it was the most exciting one that we heard because it's so much in alignment with how we think. He just framed it in a way that I haven't heard it framed before, which was fun to hear, was the golf pyramid. And so him having basically a map to help him make decisions on what he was going to work on and how he was going to work. So at the base level, if things weren't going well with form, he was at the bottom of the pyramid, which meant he would be doing blocked technical work. And then he might move it up a little bit to where the next level of the pyramid, where he was moving different curves and hitting different types of shots. There was an added degree of variability to it. And then at the top of the pyramid was where there was like ultimate transfer, where stuff that was going to go on the golf course, he could do it from different lies, different shapes. All the variability that we encounter on the golf course was present at that top. But just to have this little roadmap that says, hey, my form feels like it's not there. I can't do all this stuff at the top. I'm just going to bump it down the pyramid a little bit and get some blocked reps, maybe scale it even smaller, I think is a really helpful way to envision what our practice should look like as competitive players that go through the ebbs and flows of technique. And to have something like that to rely on, I think is pretty powerful. I assume you were as equally excited to hear about that golf pyramid.
Yeah, it certainly makes my heart sing when the best players in the world demonstrate learning the wisdom at some point in time that helps them navigate this progression and regression inside of their training, because it exists in, let's say, the strength and conditioning community. And for a long time, at least I didn't hear it in coaching community. I didn't hear players talking about leaning into creating difficulty in their training in the hopes that that one thing would reduce the weight of the 300-pound pencil, just mentioning that comment from earlier there. So without doubt. So that's the conversation with Ludvig Åberg. And I think that's a good 12-minute summary of our learnings as coaches. Hopefully this was immensely beneficial to get somewhat of a summary at the back end of this for parents, players, fellow coaches, but we're always open for feedback. And if you're still with us, then we thank you for listening in for the long haul. There's going to be more to come. This is the first in a series of just amazing guests with some amazing insight. And I hope you enjoyed it, and there's more to come.